Right, just press voice record and start going.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, hi, thanks for coming along tonight. So I'm going to talk today about my journey of switching from Unity to Unreal, which appears to have been a little bit of a hot topic. So it's something in the zeitgeist when I was begging Adam to let me do a talk the other day. So can I just get a quick sort of hands up from everyone? Who's currently using Unreal? Who's currently using Unity? Keep your hand up if you've been going, that game engine over there looks a bit interesting. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So, what I'm going to cover here, how do we go forward? No, that's not what I want to do. Excuse me, technical difficulties. Right, there we go. So I'm just going to give you a quick history of the RPG Rules project, which has been something I've been noodling around with for around about 5-6 years now. Give you a bit of advice on how to decide whether you want to pivot your project from Unity to Unreal. I'll go through the process I did when I did this. And I'll give you my impressions of Unreal so far. I'm actually going to rate the Unreal Engine out of 5 stars in various categories, and then add them up on average. So this talk is kind of aimed at anyone who's thinking about moving to Unreal. You know, it's basically things I wish I'd known 8 months ago when I started doing this. You know, that may help people out, it may put you off Unreal. These are all good results. So, history of RPG Rules, July 2017. 6 years ago, nearly. I was teaching at AIE, doing the game programming course, and I decided I needed to get much better at Unity. I kind of knew what a game object and a transform were. It stumbled through the first year major project. Apologies to all students in that year. And I thought I need to find a way to get better at Unity. I know what I'll do. I'll write a world-class RPG system. I learn by doing. So I'll do major projects with everyone else. As I progressed, I started thinking about selling it on the asset store. I ended up testing it with a GDML group. Thank you, Sarah and Katie. Started testing it with another group in the AIA incubator, you know, see if this was like a suitable system you could get people to make RPGs with. Even tried setting up testing some design students while we were at AIA in early 2020. That kind of ran aground quickly due to this worldwide pandemic that happened. But by 2020, I've now got, you know, the ability to make scriptable objects with powers with 25 types of status effects, mission logic so you could put quests and interactable objects together, leveling up with a kind of level of UI of various types that are all configurable, loot tables, crafting, plug and play AI. The AI just knew how to use whatever powers you gave them, a whole bunch of editor tools for doing various things. And I had heaps and heaps of online documentation as well. Another quick hands up, who likes writing documentation? I win. And I did win because I got approached by this guy, Steve, who was wanting to make a user-generated content ARPG, kind of cross between Dowley and Sims. And he knew of me from some old modding activities I've done. He's gone to a website, seen my copious online documentation, and I remember this sounds pretty cool. Cold call email this guy. So we went and formed a company. Turned out he was, you know, a big player in the Californian game scene. Would be advantageous to team up with him. So by 2022, we'd got the prototype of Adventureverse created, this product. You could create your own characters visually. We've got a kind of costume editor using Uma, Unity multipurpose avatar off the asset store. That was sort of fairly standard tech. What was less standard was you had the ability to fine-tune a character's abilities, what powers they had. You know, we've got this little kind of danger room screen here where you've got a character with a bunch of test dummy robots in there, and you could go, right, I want a medium damage with 10% chance of stun, a bit of knockback. We'll fire off 3 projectiles instead of 1, and so on, and just sort of tweak that. Save that to file, and then upload that to PlayFab, and other people could download these characters you've made and play them themselves or use them in their own missions. Of course, we also had a system for creating missions. Anyone familiar with either game engine will recognize the basic idea of a hierarchy here with all your objects in it, an inspector with the details for one of the objects, and content browser with the type of objects you can drop into the world. I put together this mission editor system which you could sort of place objects, spawners, quests, mission givers, whatever, link them all up in a kind of blueprint type of way, but 3D in the world. We'd integrate a dungeon architect, an asset store asset there, so you could make random dungeons using various pre-built themes. And you could upload and share these. And here's an example of one of our screens with different online campaigns that you can browse and download, made by other players. We ran a reasonably successful closed beta on Steam. Went to various modding communities and got them involved and got people trying to make characters, make missions, got some feedback on them. We were talking to investors during this whole time for 2 years. Steve was mainly handling that as the biz dev guy. And we kept coming around on the same thing. Investors really, really wanted network multiplayer. So I'd been making this system for 5 years or whatever. There's a lot of code in there. It had grown organically because this was how I learned Unity. Who likes retrofitting multiplayer to an existing project? Yeah, I'm still like So at this point, we started thinking about the pivot. Now, a fairly regular feature of our meetings, there was myself doing all the programming for this thing, and Steve doing some of the design and biz dev, and our third partner, Ailey, was the art guy. And he would often say to me, oh man, I've been trying to use the terrain tool in Unity and it sucks, and the one in Unreal's much better. Hey, Dr. Mike, when are we moving to Unreal? And I'd be like, over my dead body. I've just done 5 years of work on this project and I don't really fancy starting again from scratch. However, it did have a very solid multiplayer base built into it, this engine. And I did actually want to learn how to use Unreal. I'd been considering myself up to this point as a Unity lover. This was part of my identity. Once upon a time, back in the 90s, I was a Commodore Amiga lover, and Commodore went bust. And I had a bit of a hard time with that and had to switch to PC and C++. Could someone like these people in? This is the right place. And I didn't really want to be in that situation again, where it's back to the losing side of two things or whatever. I thought learning Unreal would make me a better game programmer. How would you go about making a decision like this? It's a fairly weighted decision. What do? You make a spreadsheet. So this is a genuine spreadsheet off Google Drive that we've got here. Not entirely sure how much we can read from this, so I'll just read some out to you. Basic power and status system for an RPG engine. In Unity, if you stay in Unity, that's already done, that'll be 0 points worth of work. To do that in Unreal, we could have a look at the gameplay ability system, which comes from Fortnite and which Unreal just give away. And that's, a multiplayable version of what I had. So I thought, I estimate there's about 8 points worth of work there to do that. Character controller. Now, our character controller was a little bit kind of jerky still, not that great. But we're thinking of looking at maybe the Opsiv character controllers off the asset store. They're about $100 plus whatever due diligence you have to do to get them working. I thought there was probably like 13 points worth of work in getting our character controllers feeling good in Unity, whereas if you go to Unreal, the character controller just feels good out of the box. So that tilts the scales again. There's a lot of things here. AI done 0 points in Unity, 3 points to rewrite my utility AI scripts in C++ and Unreal. Multiplayer needs lots of work. Photon probably 21 points in Unity. These points, I'm not entirely sure what they are. Is that what you were going to ask, Tyler? Or?
How do you get the points? Like,
How do I get the points? The Fibonacci numbers, as I'm sure you know. This comes from a practice called scrum poker, which we used to do at 6 Foot Kid, where you sort of 21 is about the biggest task you want to do before you split it down into smaller things. 13 is pretty huge. You probably need to split it down. 8, 5, 3, 2, and 1. You know, sort of gives you a rough feel for how much these things are. And like any estimates, they are just guesswork. So you then get Excel to add up all the columns for you, and it comes out with an answer. Unity, to continue in Unity would be 88 points worth of work. To move to Unreal would be 106 points worth of work. So that's my inner Mr. Spock has made a decision there that I should stick with Unity. There are two sides to every being. My inner Captain Kirk just wouldn't, you know, whatever. We're going to go to Unreal. This is sort of new and exciting, and you know, where this particular game dev has not gone before. Let's see what that's like. I'll kind of fill you in later with how I recover those 18 points worth of work. So this is our plan. I was going to do everything I'd done in the past 5 years again in C++ and Unreal. Way! Brilliant. I thought I'd start with blueprints for a month. And this is me working part-time, by the way, because I was, you know, game programming teacher at AIE at that point. I'd create a little scriptable object, data object for the powers, where you could specify how much damage, which animation to do, you know, what visual effects to use, all that kind of thing. Get a character to animate, you know, do the spell, activate the power on an animation event, you know, where you go, boom, power goes off at this point, have particles fire off at that point at the start of the animation, and when you hit on a particular body part, and maybe stick to begin with projectiles and direct range attacks. You know, you've got melee attacks, area attacks, beams, and so on, all of which require a bit of extra work. I thought we can do that in blueprints in a month. I'm going to like this engine. And, you know, great story I did. I liked it. So I thought, right, now scrunch that up into a ball, throw it over my shoulder, just like I did with the other 5 years worth of work done with that. Well, actually, we'll keep it around for reference. And then I'll make another project and convert all this into C++. And I can use the blueprint project for reference. Now, your mileage may vary on this. I've done 15 years of C++ development, so that didn't scare me, moving to the other language. For some people, going from Unity to Unreal, I know that's going to be a big ask. You're basically going from the nice, modern, takes care of things for you, C# language, to clunky, cold, hard C++, where you're having to include files and other things that, quite frankly, the computer should be doing for you. And what worried me as well was C# reflections and supported in C++. With the mission editor and the character editors and so on, I've been leaning heavily on reflection. A discovered reflection where you can ask an object, what variables do you have, what types are they, what functions do you have, and so on. And that's built into the language level of C#. In C++, that gave me a bit of a problem. What I actually did was I wrote my own, which is a stupid thing to do, because Unreal's got one built in already. I just wanted to do these things for fun sometimes. And as one of my students pointed out, you can actually just find one on GitHub if you want a reflection system. And I was like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. Oh, I've written one now. So, what do I think of Unreal? To get all judgmental with it. So I'm just going to go through different parts of the Unreal Engine, what my experiences have been with them, and then rate them harshly out of 5 stars. So, with the general editing workflow, just working on Unreal. Cold shock number 1, your C++ code can crash the editor. When you're working in Unity and you're doing C#, you can, you know, dereference a null pointer, step over the edge of an array, whatever you like, and it'll write you a letter in the console. It can be a very harsh token to
That is a lie. My code has crashed the editor many times.
I crashed the editor once in front of a class, possibly your one by overloading the graphics card.
Children,
But
okay.
you know, generally you can have a fatal error sitting in your Unity code for months and not even notice it. Or we actually had one in our project which we had to leave in because when I fixed it, it made something not work. You know, it's vital that whatever happens after this code does not happen. But it discovered quickly, basically your C# code gets compiled into a DLL which plugs right into the editor. If you try to dereference a null pointer or something like that, the editor goes down. So save your work regularly when you're writing C++ code. In its defense, it does start up again very quickly. I think faster than Unity. That could be because we've got a small project there. After you edit your C++ code, you need to recompile it manually. It doesn't need to do that automatically like Unity did. This live code compilation that it does sometimes can corrupt your data. If you've got an instance of a class open and you go and add more variables to that class, for example, it sort of gets into this weird state. Usually shutting the editor down and reopen it will fix that. I have had a few cases where I didn't fix it and had to, I can't remember what I had to do. I had to thrash around until it went away. Because all these things, all these prefabs you make are binary assets, unlike Unity, so Git has a much harder time with them. You know, you can't just diff it. If something goes wrong, you can't just diff the file and see what's changed and hope you can read the YAML code in Unity. You can't even do that. What I typically do these days as a worker, I open Visual Studio, open the project, press play, and that launches the editor. And that's got me hooked up for debugging now. That does close the editor if you reload the project, so you've got to be careful when you're making new C++ classes. You are standing over a pit there where it'll try to reload the project, which will shut down the editor while the editor is halfway through making a new class for you. So look out for that one. Debugging is great. You can debug blueprints. So I'll talk about blueprints in a minute. I'm guessing you all know what they are roughly, visual coding. Any node which has got execution on it, you can just press F9 and put a big red dot on it, just like Visual Studio in code. When you run it, a big red arrow appears to say your code has stopped here. You can F10 to jump across to the next node, F11 to step into a function. You can examine variables like I'm doing here just by hovering the mouse over the pins that connect them. Call func is locally controlled, returns value true. There's this thing coming in here, this condition is true in this case. So it's got some really nice debugging features for a visual coding system. The closest I'd worked with this before was Shader Graph, which had none of that, being a graphics card thing. When you're debugging a blueprint as well, you've got this drop list here at the top, where you can select which instance of the object you want to have a look at. And then you can see all its properties in the details panel. I only found that out 2 months ago, so that's a really good one. So overall, 3 out of 5 for actually working with Unreal. It's a little bit weird and uncomfortable, but the debugging facilities definitely bring that score up. Documentation. There's a lot of low-quality doxygen-generated pages in the Unreal documentation where it tells you things like float warm-up tick rate. Warm-up tick rate, the time step for each tick during warm-up. No shit. Thank you for writing that comment, whoever did. She actually said something about how to use it. There are very few examples of working code. Doing this, I started to realize how good the Unity documentation has been. But half the pages I've ever searched for, it's like an example of working code, not only telling you how to do the thing you're interested in, but sometimes how you can do other stuff as well. So you've got to remember that for later. And also because of the dual nature of Unreal, you've got blueprints and C++ code. If you're looking for tutorials in C++ code, you often end up in a blueprint tutorial instead. And because of the nature of blueprints and how you work with them, they're often videos as well, rather than web pages. What is the general consensus? Who here likes learning from a video? That's not good for you. Who prefers web pages and text? Yeah. I wasn't sure if that was just because I was old. There we go. All right, blueprints. Whoa, 5 stars for these. So they're a little bit different from shader graph, and we've got these execution pins. These little white arrows here basically telling you the order in which things happen. And some simple operations like doing a cast from one type to another have execution pins, and you have to daisy chain it into the chain of execution that way. All the examples, when you start a new project with blueprint examples for, say, character control, are commented into really lovely blocks. I mean, just look at this, and it sings readability. You know, you've got big comments on the top here, everything's lined up nicely, these are sequence here to do this, then this, then this. And I do find that really encourages you to make your own blueprints in it. If you take something like this and you have to add a couple of things for your own character control and you just kind of blob them up here with, you know, like some, I don't know, guts dangling out of whatever, you feel a bit dirty kind of, so you tend to comment your own code in that way. It's a really good way to learn how to do things in Unreal if you're a programmer. If you're not a programmer, you're also often empowered by this. This is where the 18 points have come from. Steve, my business partner, majored in programming, but he's a biz dev guy. He hadn't done any programming for a while, and he just dove into this and just gone with the nuts of it, made his own little multiplayer demo and everything. So, you know, there are possibly people on your own team who will be able to do things they couldn't do before because you've got blueprints. If you're a programmer, I do recommend doing things in blueprints first, because then you can use that as a reference for how to do it in C++ later. And a really handy menu item here on any prefab blueprint, you can just go File, Repair to Blueprint. So if you've made something that's a character, a standard Unreal character, you've given it all this functionality in blueprints, and then you wanted to use your own C++ class, you just reparent it to the new class you've made, and everything will be fine. So 5 points there. Right, animation. Here's what I used to do in Unity. I've got an enum with names of all the animations that the character could use to do different powers, like, say, one-handed cast here. In the scriptable object, I would have a reference to that enum with a drop list, so I'd select one-handed cast there. And then in my animation graph in the subnode here, I had a whole bunch of nodes called one-handed cast and so on. Exact same names as the enums. I would then call the animation use animated crossfade and give the name of the thing by casting the enum to a string, which always felt a bit wrong because I should have been using a trigger to do this. But if I was going to use triggers, I'd have to set up a trigger for each of these things in the enum for every one of them. I'll just stick to doing it the nasty way. That would have required more setup, so it felt a little bit kind of bulky. But in Unreal, I put a slot in my animation graph, basically saying the final animation has to go through this slot first, then you go into the other stuff, and that'll put the output pose out eventually. And I can just drop an animation or a montage into there directly as data, and it just works. So my little data assets. Yep.
Just out of curiosity, is some of this stuff like that you're using in Unity have you revisited it since using Unreal?
No.
I was just curious because I think like some of the animation stuff has been.
Yeah, yeah. Competition has been great for both features. You're right, Keirron, and a lot of the features, I mean, like blueprints themselves, for example, you've got Bolt and Unity.
Yeah.
Which may at some point become an official part of the engine. Yeah. So no, that animation thing I showed you is 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
So it's very unfair. We'll see what mark I give the animation system. So my data assets now, the scriptable object equivalent, can just have a direct reference to an animation. And it just goes in the slot and works. You don't need to mess around with an enum or anything. So that's really nice. Just go skeletal dash, get animations, montage play. A montage, by the way, is a little asset with several animations put together with blended things. For example, I haven't tried this yet. If you had a charge-up attack where you like that. You'd have a looping part of the animation here. You put that into the montage with some conditions and events and so on, and then the actual delivery, and you can put that together as one sort of asset you can use repeatedly, and so on. Animation events, unit had animation events, you can put them on an animation. They then call any function with matching name and any sibling scripts to the animator, and you could pass parameters through. Unreal's got the anim notify. Typically, the first tutorial you find when you look up anim notify will tell you something like, here's a character running, you can put an anim notify to play a sound when their foot goes down, and you can drag the sound in there, and it'll always play that sound. Or you can put another one to puff some particles up so they're kicking up dust when they run. And that's cool if you're writing a game like, say, Sonic the Hedgehog, where you've got a fixed character who does their thing. I've been working on very kind of data-driven stuff. You don't know ahead of time which animation you want to play for a character to do a power or whatever, or what particles you want to come off. So you can, in Blueprints, do what's called a skeleton notify. And as soon as you put a skeleton notify in an animation, that becomes available in the Blueprints. You can put the same skeleton notify with the same name on different animations that way. If you're in C++, you create your own class derived from anim notify, and you have a virtual function you override. Like I've got this anim notify underscore action class that allows me to put actions here, and that's the point where the action happens, where the power goes off. And that's been really nice to deal with. Sharing animations, Unity had the humanoid system, where you could download an animation off Mixamo, mess around with it eventually, figure out the T-pose problem, get it to work. That only took me a couple of years. Unreal's got retargeting. You can retarget an animation from one character to another. You just right-click and go retarget animation assets, and this window pops up. To get Mixamo animations working on Unreal, I had to find a plugin that gave me the right to retarget, mainly because my technical art skills suck. I couldn't set that up myself. But it's a solved once, not a complicated problem really. So overall, the animation system gets 5 stars. As Keirron pointed out, it should maybe be 5.5 real, that version of Unity. Multiplayer. So this was what I'd come here for, wasn't it? I wanted to be able to make multiplayer. It wasn't quite as simple as I thought, where you just check a box and say, I want multiplayer, and then it all works. In a lot of ways, it's comparable to working with Unity in either Mirror or Photon. You do still have to break an action down into what happens on the server, what happens on the client, that sort of thing. Like here, I've got server power down and server power up functions. They've got the ufunction server attribute on them, saying they're things that are going to happen on the client and get called on the server. I've just pressed this key down. I've just lifted this key up. Then you have multicast power in it. Is a net multicast. That's like an RPC client. These are like commands, for those of you who've worked with Mirror. This function, where I've got server power down, in your CPP file, it then says server power down underscore implementation. And the thing that links this to this is hidden away and generated code somewhere. And IntelliSense gets very confused by that. But similar in scope to working with Mirror or Photon, really. Setting up lobbies and that kind of thing is a lot easier to do, and you can do this in Blueprints. So yeah, overall that was a 4-star experience working with multiplayer. I was glad that I'd done some multiplayer before in other systems. I could probably have made it a lot easier for myself just going with the game action system from Fortnite and working with that, but hands up and does things the hard way. Yeah, it's disease. Right, so scriptable objects. These were a core part of everything we've been doing, having little blobs of data and settings for powers, power sets, stuff like that. In Blueprints, I found you can derive a class called from primary data asset, and that allows you to create a template in your Blueprints and say, I'm going to create this thing called a power or a status or whatever, and it has these variables, and then you can derive from that to create instances of that, fireball, punch, self-heal, or whatever as powers. So C++ is entirely optional with working with it. I do find creating a new object a bit fiddly. I just want to gripe that on Unreal's interface here. You go create object, miscellaneous data asset. Then it pops up a dialog saying what kind of data asset do you want, and you have to find the class, power or status or whatever. And most of the time I just take an existing one and duplicate it, just go Control D. If I've already got a power in the folder which I'm working with. Right, I don't like the details editor. I'll moan about that. It's a horrible use of screen real estate. You have all the names, little tiny text here, all the editors in this little thin column here that doesn't get bigger no matter if you make it full screen or whatever. And these drop lists are often a bit hard to read because the names of things go over the edge of them and you can't expand them that I know. By the way, if anyone wants to correct me, feel free to, with all the stuff you can't do. You know that technique of writing to a forum and putting a wrong answer if you want to find out the right answer? Yeah. So there is no easy way to give types of scriptable objects different icons in the editor. Back in Unity, there's the Gizmo system where I could basically draw these little icons here for different types of object. And we could look at this and go, I see we've got beams there. This one's a little radiant thing. Oh, there's a melee attack with a little fist. That's an absorption one, direct attack. That's a power set, etc. And it's read really well when you're dealing with lots and lots of scriptable objects which all reference each other. Unreal, sadly, everything looks like Pac-Man. They're all in their little box, which is a really nice bit of layout if you're looking at meshes and textures. This is a program which is a bit kind of more artist-orientated, perhaps. And underneath each of them, it tells you that it's a data asset. And you have to mouse over it to find out that it's RPG rules cpp.damage. Thanks a lot. So I think I'll be using folders much more heavily there, rather than just having a big box where I can put all these things in and have different icons to differentiate. Making C++ classes derived from UData assets very easy. Okay, and I don't want to get dramatic here, but enums, as far as I can tell, no, I'm not going to say as far as I can tell because I'm going to be corrected. Enums can only be 8-bit numbers. Why? You've got this T enums byte templated thing where you can store enum. Like here I've got one for damage types for a shield, where you want to say what does it protect against? Crushing, piercing, toxic, fire, cold, electrical, energy, psionic, magic. That's 9 damage types. I can't fit them into an 8-bit number. I'll just be depressed for a minute here. There are ways to do bit fields to have it, this is like an older way to do it, it's wrong actually. You can get it so that you can see different things, like crushing or piercing or whatever. But I've tried a number of different things, and I think I'm going to have to split that up into 2 TE numbers bytes. It's 2023. All numbers are 32-bit on a 32-bit operating system, or 64-bit, But I have no idea when the 8-bit used to be standard back in the 80s, well before Unreal. I'll show you. That actually I won't show it, we'll give them text tomorrow, so that's all again scriptable objects. It's this thing here. Is it unreasonable to want 9 damage types? Hands of anyone who thinks it is. Particles. I haven't done a lot with these really. There are 2 particle systems. It's Niagara, it's a new GPU-based one, so that's like the visual effect, it's graphing Unity. All the physics and the moving around is being done on the GPU. Cascade is the old CPU-based one, like Shuriken in the Unity. Nearly every marketplace asset is Cascade still. When I went on the marketplace to find Niagara particles, I think I found one set for free. So nearly all free ones are Cascade. Almost didn't need to say that. angry here about written something. It seems to be impossible in script, in C++ code rather, to make a particle loop or not loop. There's a tick box for it in the particle editor. And sometimes, like say I've got a fireball, I might have a kind of, fire puff. I might have an instant attack where you want to go, boom, and the fireball just puffs the fire and forgets things on your hand. I might also want to use that fireball to charge something up. Particle activator now. Keep looping until I say so. Boom, when I release the key. And it seems like I have to go and make two particle systems in the editor and tick the tick box, one looping, one not looping. Which, I think is why I've only given this 3 stars so far. Like I said, I've probably spent about a day on particles at most so far. So this could be a totally ignorant assessment. All right, UI. Those who know me will know I like nothing better than making big, complicated UIs which are programmatically generated, for leveling up screens, stuff like that. You get good visual layout tools, and you can nest blueprints really nicely. So here I've got a character HUD thing with the character's name, the health bar, the mana bar, the charge up bar, the portrait. Status effects will appear on here. There's some debug information for all the multiplayer stuff I was doing. And there's a little blueprint called BP Character UI 4. Here I've got the entire game HUD set up, and I've dropped a couple of them in for the player and for their current target, the character they're targeting at the moment. And they appear in the user-created section of your toolbox here. We've got BP Character UI Full. So you can make a little module in one editor window, then drop instances of that into another editor window and nest everything really nicely. These status icons here are a nested thing within that, so you can nest multiple levels deep. Very nice. Binding with C++, oh my god, I love this thing. What you can do is you name the controls and then say whether they're mandatory or optional. So here I've got a progress bar called health, and I've got meta equals bind widget, which isn't documented anywhere, by the way. I had to look that up and just found it on someone's blog. And I've been going nuts with it ever since. And then here, in 2 instances of this character UI, I've got a full one here to go on the HUD where you see a portrait and everything. This is a little one that appears above a character's head, just with their name and their bars. And both of them have a progress bar called health. And it just links them together. You can then go health set percent, and it works on the UI object. I didn't do this in Unity because I thought it was fragile. That the designer who was putting together the UI might not know you have to call this health, you might be confused or rename it the wrong way. What happens is when you try to compile these blueprints, it goes, no, you need a progress bar called health. I'm not going to compile until you give me one. And that's it. You can also go bind widget optional, like I do, for example, for the portrait. Not every character HUD needs a portrait. You don't need a character running around with that portrait above their head. Because you know what you look like by seeing them in game, but it's handy for the HUD. So that's a kind of optional one. If you're going to use one of them, you have to null pointer check it, because it might be null. So that's been the interface between back-end code and front-end UI as well. I will say that setting up a HUD's really weird. The one thing I've had to get used to is all these UI elements, progress bars, checkboxes, etc., they're not actors. In Unity, all those things just are the game objects. Same as anything else, you can see them in the hierarchy, you can look at them in the inspector. So what you have to do here is find another blueprint, like say the character. And here we go, and is this the local character in a multiplayer game? If so, create a game HUD widget and we'll give the class here, BP game HUD. This is the blueprint we showed you earlier, the full game HUD with everything on it. You create one of them and you then have to go add to viewport to pop it on the screen. And then it appears in here and setting the character and saying, make this character the character whose stats and information we're displaying. So I liked Unity more, where you just put it into the scene, and then run scripts to link it up. This seems a little bit odd, but whatever. It works. And on top of that as well, if you want to have a world space UI, you can use a widget component inside any of your prefabs. Say you have health bars above a character's head. These are derived from scene component, which is basically any sub-part of a prefab with a transform on it to talk Unity talk. And you can communicate with that object in Blueprint or in code. What I'm doing here is I've made this thing called widget component. I'm going and attaching it to the mesh as a child, moving it to the right position, overriding the data here so that everyone's using the same blueprint, which is stored in one scriptable objects or data assets here. And it's just another variable you can talk to and it works. So that's been pretty easy to work with as well. If you want to clone components and set up layouts, have a empty box where you can pop all the status icons that your character's experienced at the moment, that works well enough. I've got the code set out here. The main thing you have to do is to call this function duplicate object, a global function in, I think it's GamePlus statics, is this class that has all the stuff you do in blueprints. So what I've done here is I've made a container, which is a horizontal layout box. I've got a power UI in there, which is a little thing for a power. This is to make the character's powers appear on the screen so you can show it all in. And then you just go for the first one, we'll just use the one you've put there already. For the other ones, we'll duplicate a new one of that. It'll create copies. And yeah, that's worked as nicely as it did in Unity. So the UI has been a 5-star experience. This is one of the things that's kept me coming back to Unreal. That working with kind of complicated UIs, the graphic design side of UIs and so on, has all been really nice and pleasant so far. So here's the final scores. And if you add them up on average, though, you get 28 out of 40, or 3.5 stars out of 5, or 7 out of 10. For fans of quick fire mental arithmetic. Yeah. So, how do I feel about this? I've taken this project that I was working on for 5 years, kind of trashed it, to move in with a new game engine, and I've now got something very basic. I've got a couple of robots running around in a box, throwing fireballs to each other. And this is also to address anyone who's thinking, should I make the move as well? So the project, obviously, is way behind schedule. I've gone and thrown away a lot of work. There's no getting around it. I've gone and thrown away a lot of expertise as well. I went from 2017 not knowing enough about Unity to kind of being the program supreme in Unity. It's like that's all a little bit off to the side now. Because mainly I'm having to rewrite everything. However, there's something nice about rewriting everything. It's a chance to do better. I've often said to people, the third UI system you write will be awesome. The third AI system you write will be fantastic. I'm on the second one. So I'm actually, as I go through and rewrite the status system and so on, it's like, the way I was doing that was too many runtime allocations. Switched around like this is better now. And me and my team do have the luxury of time. None of us need this project to work. I am tech director of a games company. I'm not about to, go under if I don't get this side project finished. So, and then on top of that, I'm a better game dev because I know Unreal. Working as a tech director at a company that does ports and remasters, which game engine is more beneficial to know? I wonder. So these are the questions you want to ask yourself if you're looking at doing this move. Can you afford to throw away work? And do you want to do a big scrape and polish of your project and write everything again from scratch? That can actually be a nice thing if you've got time. Are there other reasons why you want to know Unreal? Are you looking for work in the games industry? The Adelaide games industry is changing. 4 years ago, 4 years ago, I would have said, yeah, look, everything's Unity in this town. Mighty Kingdom, Foxy Games, Board Games are all using Unity. There's Patrick. And Sharp Jump. Anyone from Sharp Jump here? Now we've got, 2 AAA companies that have moved in. On top of that, we've had a worldwide pandemic, which has opened up the possibility of remote work. We've had Ben Dreamers from Uppercut Games coming in and looking at the AIE, open nights to try and hire programmers for Unreal, and so on. Chances are knowing Unreal may make things better for you as well, if you've got a side project to run around with. I will, however, leave that deep internal question up to you individually. Does anyone have any questions, deep or shallow, for me? Kathy?
Can you compare the experience of bringing in art to AI?
Between Unity and Unreal?
That's what makes